So, yep, like I said, guess I met you about 2.5 years ago. We
Yeah,
were just opening
yeah.
the brewery.
So wrote the business plan in May 2014. Basically rounded up money in about a week. Went over to the U.S., scoured all the hot spots for craft beer. Hooked up with Alex Violet from Boulder, Colorado. He moved over here late 2014, and we got started. And there was nothing here in the market to support craft beer. With a lot of innovation, and we were able to open a tap room January 2nd, 2015. And from there, it was kind of the revolution that happened in Vietnam of craft beer. So people saw that it was possible to source ingredients, to brew the beer here, to basically that there was interest here. So a lot of the breweries started opening up, a lot more the scene started happening, and we just our tap room was packed with American expats in the beginning that knew craft beer, especially into a more wider range of expats, Japanese, Australian, things like that, into Vietnamese, usually working with these expats, like international companies, and then that just started to blossom off of there. As Vietnamese would come in, they'd introduce their friends, and they would just kind of build the market off that. A lot of tourists coming in to have an experience of craft beer in Vietnam, something a bit different. And we started distribution in middle of 2015. Now I think we're at about 140 or 150 accounts nationwide, and now exporting quite a bit. So now we do Hong Kong, Malaysia, Thailand, and U.S. And U.S. is kind of the newest focus for us for the development of the business. We were able to create really quality products out of Vietnam using local ingredients, fresh fruit, herbs, spices, cacao that in the U.S. they don't have access to as much. So while a lot of the breweries in the U.S. were using extracts in a lot of the beers, we're able to get fresh passion fruit, fresh cacao, fresh peppercorn, things like that here, and it really makes a difference in the beer. So we've entered a lot of competitions. We've won some medals in Singapore for the Asia Beer Medals. We've won some medals in Asia Beer Cup in Japan, just 2 in Australia, 2 more in the U.S. So we're in a World Beer Cup for the chocolate stout that we do. So we've kind
That's one of my favorite
Yeah.
beers that you guys carry is the chocolate stout.
Yeah.
I always come back to that one.
Yeah. So it's basically it's not only just kind of bringing craft beer to Vietnam and saying, hey, here is an American style beer and we're an American style bar and this is what good beer tastes like. That's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to bring over the culture and bring over what was happening abroad to Vietnam, but then let it flourish into its own scene, to its own thing, not like, hey, this is good beer, this is an IPA, this is that. We wanted to use all local stuff to make a Vietnamese craft beer.
Is Alex still with you guys? Or?
Alex he's still on the board. He's back in the U.S. In Tennessee. Him and his girlfriend had a kid here about a year and a half after they were here, so they ended up moving back. But he's still a partner of the company and helps out quite a bit with.
So now you have a different brewmaster? Or?
Yeah, now we have a brewmaster from Florida as well, and actually 2 guys from Florida and another guy from Massachusetts. So 3 Americans still kind of brewing the beer, overseeing a lot of recipe development and flavor profile, just because it's still new in Vietnam. It's hard to find Vietnamese craft brewers that kind of have that experience that you need to have to make sure you make consistent products. So, but there's a lot of Vietnamese at the brewery, working with us, learning the process, brewing with us, doing typical things like transferring and packaging and things like that. So I think as the industry becomes more established and you get more local Vietnamese in the industry, same as the U.S., they kind of get their foot in the door, work at a brewery for a while, and then hopefully we'll get to a point where they'll become brewers themselves.
How long do you think that'll take?
I think it depends a bit on the home brew scene also. So if they're home brewing at home, working in a brewery, and that passion is there, then that link will create things a lot more
because
quick.
that's very common in the U.S., but not so much.
Exactly.
Here.
So there needs to be it needs to be a hobby. It needs to be a passion. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of long hours to make beer. It's not just kind of this glorious job is 7-8 hours for a batch of beer of shoveling grain, steam in the face, cleaning the tanks, just really hardcore work. So you have to be passionate to want to be in it. And but we want to see more of that coming up. And I think it took maybe 20 or 30 years in the U.S. Maybe it'll take 5 or 10 here. So if that happens.
Yeah, I've noticed that the development of the beer culture here is really big and pretty fast for craft beer. I mean,
sure. I think everything here just leaps forward. Whether sometimes there's just in the U.S. there's a certain timeline that things happen. Here it kind of goes from one to the next without much in between.
Well, I think it just takes a couple trailblazers, like Pasteur Street is one, first to introduce that idea.
Yeah.
And once it sparks with the Vietnamese people, it takes off very quickly.
Yeah, so that's really cool to see. So we hope that coming in and creating this path of showing people it's possible, showing people that we can get the licensing, and the government is actually okay with letting people do this. That it's not this protected industry where people think it's very maybe hard to get entry into it because there's a lot of money or something. It's not really like that. I think the Vietnamese government has been very, very nice and very cool that they've allowed this. It's very clear that it's happening, and they're not taking any action to stop it because I think they're quite interested in what's happening with it.
I've read online that Vietnam is the biggest consuming Asian beer market in the world. So I mean, all of Asia.
Yeah, so probably maybe a lot of people that work there are actually enjoying the beers themselves and don't want to see them go away. So it's exciting to see that, and we want to see it flourish. We want to see it grow. I think now there's like 15 breweries here or so. They can come together and maybe create more of an education platform, more festivals, more ways for the Vietnamese consumer to understand the word craft beer versus just like an import Belgian beer, import European beer, import U.S. American beer. So it takes time. It takes word of mouth. It takes education between consumers, but we do see it's on the right path, and who knows where it'll be in 5 or 10 years. So.
I want to ask you about, you said you locally source a lot of ingredients and whatnot. So do you approach like farmers in Dalat or like?
Sure. Sometimes we don't like to go too far too quick because we do a lot of experimenting. We've done over 100 beers in our tap room, and we tend to go to local markets first and work with local herbs and spices and fruits and things like that. Play with the recipe a few times. If it's something that we want to basically get top notch and the best, and we want to kind of take it further and dial in the recipe, then we'll start sourcing from farmers. And because we can't walk up and just necessarily drive to Dalat to buy a kilo of something, it's you want to get it from the middleman or whatever first, but then you start wanting to go to that.
It's from that farm.
From that farm. So it's definitely knowing your markets well is important. Knowing the suppliers, the vendors. Sometimes you just call the farmers too, and they'll tell you where to get it. A lot of times in the city. But then actually going there, and once you identify, like this is, for example, like passion fruit or cacao, that we actually go to the farm and visit to make sure that it is the best quality. We make sure we go to the region and make sure that this is the best farmer, and this is the best quality fruit that we can get, or quality herb or spice from Vietnam, and it's not just the local market for whatever's available. We know that there's a lot of it, and we want to get the best, so we'll go to the farms after that. But taking the time to go, like basically only go and do that takes kind of one step ahead of the game. So what we do is tend to experiment with local stuff first, and then dig in deeper if we feel like it's going to be a more long-term product for us.
Okay. So, you personally, what's your favorite brew that you guys carry? Like I mentioned, I
would say mine is the passion fruit Riedel.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say for me it's very drinkable, sessionable, great for a hot day. It's not too hoppy to where it's you can have 4 or 5 of them and like throughout the day if you're outside or something, and really it cleanses the palate. It's not about like really kind of bogging down your taste buds, where some of the beers we have are meant for dinner, they're meant for evening, they're meant for 1 or 2 or having with friends, where I think the passion fruit is nice because it is a bit more sessionable and a bit more easy to drink and low alcohol. So it's
What's the bitterness?
the IBUs on the passion fruit. I'm not sure the exact IBU, but it's quite low. It's a wheat ale, and we use fresh passion fruit juice inside of it. So yeah, it's a bit more tart than I would say bitter.
What's your best seller?
Bestseller is our Jasmine IPA for Vietnam, but for export it is passion fruit.
Okay.
So in the U.S. the beer market's a bit different. The consumer's a bit different. They're looking for sours. They're looking for tart beers. They're looking for something. They're kind of not over the IPA phase, but that was
But it's still common.
very early. Yeah, that was. But now they're kind of exploring new flavors and things. So sometimes we see the passion fruit's too early for Vietnam. That's why the IPA does so well. And then I think as people kind of develop their palate, they'll explore into new flavor profiles.
Yeah.
So, but that's kind of what we see, and that's what we're rolling out in the U.S. right now. There's quite a bit of the Siglo Stout and the passion fruit we do. So.
You mentioned like working together. How many local restaurants or bars carry PS?
I think we're like 140 or 150 now. Yeah. So it's anywhere from a 5-star hotel down to local Vietnamese bar, and it's a lot of more new F&B that's opening up. We see a lot of growth in that sector, where it is not an existing bar or restaurant that's been around for 5 or 10 years. It's actually a young Vietnamese opening a new concept, and they know, like, I want something different. I want something unique. I want something young
they
and
would
hip.
like themselves.
Yeah, so you see a lot of support on that front, which is very cool. We like to see that that there's young entrepreneurs that are supporting local, and they are they want something different. It's not, they're not ingrained to say, I'm sorry, my consumer won't pay that money for a beer. They say, it doesn't taste like a typical lager, then we won't sell it. They're very open-minded. They said, if it's a good quality product and it costs a bit more money, people will spend more money on 1 or 2 beers than more money on 5 or 10 beers to get drunk. So we do see that quite a bit. And
Yeah, because from what I know, the beer culture here before craft came was just with ice, light, ambers, or the lagers or whatnot. And
Yeah, it's typically, I think most parts of the world is what it was. It's more of an adjunct lager. They come in and they brew with some rice and things like that to keep the price down, and they make it more affordable. And usually it's more as with ice, you're basically just drinking
water.
Yeah, you're drinking water to get a little bit drunk.
Flavor.
Yeah, a little bit of flavor, and you're getting drunk on it. So it's more of an avenue for the alcohol than it is actually the avenue for the flavor and the experience. So that's what we wanted to change. We wanted to change the culture a bit on. You don't need to get drunk, to have a nice drink and have 1 or 2 beers with a friend. You can spend generally the same amount of money and have a few tasters, and you leave there, having a good time, but not necessarily unsafe to drive, or can't wake up the next day or something like that. So
no hangover.
yeah, we do see a lot of groups of Vietnamese coming in and just being social. They treat it maybe a bit more like tea or coffee. Where they share a taster together in a group, and it's coming in and it's an experience together, not necessarily being on the street and drinking as many beers as you can, and then kind of that culture is a bit different. So that's what you see the same in the U.S. That's how I felt as I got my late 20s, early 30s. I didn't want to go out and drink
just to get drunk.
20 beers and do that. I'd rather just end work, meet a friend, have 1 or 2 beers that taste really good, and feel good, relax, and then be like, hey, I'm ready to go home now. And that's what that craft beer culture does in a positive way, help the community. As far as putting a different light on alcohol, where it's not necessarily a bad thing of using it to get drunk, but more of a sophisticated product, similar to wine.
More to wine, yeah.
So. It's interesting to see that also blossom. So there's a lot of different things happening at one time when craft beer hits here. It's Vietnamese saying, wow, it's really crazy to see that you can make craft beer here in Vietnam and you can export it to America, and that we're just used to maybe a cheaper product. Here typically You see the culture of the just drinking with men and women coming together in a group instead of all men or something like that, coming in together for something social. You see business meetings, men and women having a drink together and talking. You see innovation of a lot of local brewers, and it's just a lot of moving parts that are interesting to watch culturally to bring craft beer here. So we, like I said before, and we talked about it, it's now you kind of put it there and then you let it go in its own direction to see where it actually evolves to for Vietnam. It could be something different from what it is in America, but it's interesting to see how it's going to pan out. So.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for
Yeah, man. No problem.